Hello and welcome. Today I'm joined by Alison Knowles, the founder of Subconquest, an innovative approach that's changing the way that we think about emotional well-being in children, and of course the ripple effect that it has on families and workplaces. We talk a lot in this space about supporting employees, particularly when it comes to EAPs. But what happens when someone's biggest challenge isn't at work, it's actually at home? When a child is struggling emotionally, it doesn't just stay at the school gate. It follows the parent into the workplace. It starts affecting their focus, and it can have a huge impact on the performance and the well-being of that employee. Alison's work is at the heart of that, and I'm really looking forward to exploring that with her today. So, hi Alison, and thank you for doing this with us.
Oh, no worries. Thank you for having me, Carl, as always. Appreciate it.
So before we dive into Subconquest, should we talk a little bit about you, about your background?
All
What
about
led
me.
you? What led you? Well, why not? What sort of led you to create this? I mean, it's a really innovative approach, isn't it? So what led you to today?
Have you ever heard that saying, out of diversity comes something? I'm dyslexic with letters and numbers, so there's a whole backstory that it's a therapy session in itself. But ultimately, when I finally found my calling, and I know it sounds corny, but it is, to be a therapist, I trained in CBT and various other things. And I was enjoying what I was doing because it's what I wanted to do. I can't read and write. I struggle if anything's overly complicated. And I just figured there's more of me than there is of them, really. And we just keep our heads down and we don't reach out for support because you might get judged or knocked back. And I just wanted to come up with something that was accessible, that didn't fix. I'm not stupid. I can't read and write, but I'm not stupid. I don't need fixing. I need someone just to see that I'm very capable. If you just give me the tools, but give me them in a language I understand, and then I can take care of me and I can take care of those I love. But that therapeutic model didn't exist. And it was absolutely by chance that it finally was born, and it certainly wasn't anything that I can take proper credit for because I didn't sit down and think it through. It kind of just happened.
So when you say it just happened, I think that's a really interesting comment, because children obviously are they kind of sit at the heart of every parent's good times and bad times. But we see people really struggling at work, don't we? So I wondered, in your work, how often do you specifically come across those parents struggling at work because of their children's mental health? Because as I said at the beginning, it's that stuff that normally doesn't sit at the gate. It follows them everywhere, right throughout their life. Do you see it?
It's an interesting thing because we are now involved with you guys in the EAP world, and we're very proud to be, and in a more commercial world. But we were private practice, and private practice meant that we saw every walk of life. So what tended to happen was we were seeing parents bringing their children, using the money they had available for their children, because kids come first, second, and third. And it was actually the parents that were really, really struggling, and the kids were reacting to that struggle, and that was causing an awful lot of the issues we saw in the kids. So parents were carrying around anxiety, stress, stuff they don't need to, and it absolutely was affecting them at work. They weren't at work because they couldn't cope. Some of them were in fear of losing their job because they couldn't cope. But rather than reach out for help for themselves because they saw the impact of it affecting their children, that's where their finances and their efforts went. So absolutely, I had parents having to give up work, parents getting into trouble at work because they weren't focused or they were taking days off. I mean, if your child won't go into school and you get a phone call from school, what choice have you got? You've got to just say, I'm sorry, I'm going. If you had to be in a big meeting that afternoon, that doesn't go down so well. Everybody's like, all right, yeah, no, but it doesn't go down well. So yeah, absolutely, it's affecting. And without work, they can't take care of the kids. So it's almost like a continuing cycle of pain.
And I think actually it's something that's been overlooked by employers previously. We've recently done a survey at EAPA, the Employee Assistance Professionals Associations, looking at why people contact EAP services. And traditionally, it's always been, I've got issues with my manager, you know, I've got struggles at work, I've got some issues with my relationships at home. But for the first time ever this year, what we found was the number three reason that any employee contacts an EAP service is actually around their children's mental health. And I think it's difficult for organizations that an EAP or mental health services around the wellbeing model has to look at employees because that's who they're there to help. And traditionally then it means that looking after families isn't something that they maybe have considered their responsibility before. Maybe it's something around tax because of course within the world of EAP, if you're supporting the employee themselves, then that has a level of tax exemption to it. But you start bringing in their families, and that really impacts kind of an organization's ability to know where they stand regarding tax for the well-being of their employees. So I think traditionally this area has been overlooked, either because they can't look at it because of tax or because they don't think it's their responsibility. Do you think there are any other reasons that employers haven't engaged with this previously?
There's a myriad, but just before I jump on that, I'll come back. I've seen snippets of your report and it's spot on. You say children are third. I would actually say they were first, because if you look at why we're having relationship difficulties or arguments at work because we're stressed and we're tired and we need time off, that's about kids. So although it's ranked third because of the way maybe the question was asked, I would say that if we could actually make employees feel that the support was there for the children, the thing we go to work for, the thing we get up for in the morning, then I think those top two would disappear. So what can employees do? Why don't they? I understand the tax thing, and it's a real damn shame because I don't know what the figures are. You can probably tell me, Carl, of lost man days from people not being at work, and it's not because of themselves necessarily. 9 times out of 10, it's about home life and the children. With employees, some of the employees that we've worked with, we've had this discussion, and there is this tax bracket problem. But what they've done is they've listened to what I've said. That actually, you know, would you be bashing heads with your colleague at work? Would you be taking times off? Would you be having problems with your relationship if you weren't worried about your kids? Well, no. So would it make sense to start there? Well, yes, but we can't because of these tax brackets and because, you know, all the systems set up to take care. So I said, but it's family. And the reality is, if we just worked with your child, which we're not allowed to do because of tax problems, it's not going to solve the problem because the child's reacting to their environment, even teenagers. And that environment is family. So for me, there isn't a child, teen, family thing. It's one. And employers need to recognise that actually they need to be able to take care of the family unit because it is one, it's not 3 different things. And if you do that, then we're going to have happy employees, we're going to have people back at work, and you're going to have to rewrite your stats because it will be about family and not. Sorry.
I think you're right, and you know, for me, the times in my life that have caused the most anxiety and worry and impacted me at work has been children. Yeah, exactly. And I suppose when we think about that, it will be at the top. It probably is at the top. I think what we're saying was more specifically, have the reasons that you've taken time off work been around worries to do with your children's mental health? And I think that's something that we're seeing more and more of, isn't it? Where children are being diagnosed. Yeah, children are being diagnosed with ADHD or other issues or mental health issues that need to be supported. The children hear that, maybe it impacts them with their friends, maybe social media is not helping. But what that means is that the parent has to support that child, and that impact at work it's just enormous.
Do you know what I find really funny? I have to look at things simply, and I know that can be rather annoying to people that sit back and do statistics and stuff. But the reality is, if we were able, through things like your EAPs and other systems, to get to the family, not just the employee, a lot quicker, then we could stop the spiral. Because what happens is the employee is stressed because the child is not getting the support. So if we could give the child support, the employee would stop being stressed. But because the employee is stressed because they can't give their child support, that trickles down, the child gets more stressed, all of a sudden we've got this spiral, and it could be nipped in the bud just by allowing access to family support, because it is the environment. It needs to be a joined up approach to everybody's mental health, yours, mine. It's what's going on around us. Unless you are one of the unfortunates that's born with a condition that affects your mental health. But most of us, it's what's happening around us and how we cope with that. And if others aren't coping because of additional stress, work, am I going to lose my job? Husband's not talking to me because I'm biting his head off. Or, it just spirals out of control, and it really doesn't have to.
How do you think it impacts people specifically at work then? You mentioned a couple of things earlier, but what sort of things have you seen specifically?
I see an awful lot where people are afraid they're about to lose their jobs, and they need letters from me, the nice therapist, to say that actually, they are in therapy. Do they need that therapy? They do. They're stressed, but actually, arguably, it's their children that need it and can't get the support. But without that letter, then they risk getting on the blacklist at work because, as I've said, it would be something as simple. If you imagine you today, we're meeting today, and your child didn't want to go to school today, just had an absolute meltdown. What do? One of you's got to go. Is it you? Is it your wife? How do you decide that? Is it the one that earns more? Is it the one that has a more flexible job? How do you choose? That causes problems in relationships. You might be the managing director and I might not, but my job's just as important. And then off we go again. So, and if you're thinking, you're worried about, is my child at home? She's with a carer. Is she going to get through the day at school? Is that diagnosis going to come through? Can I afford for support for her? Because I know if I did that, everything else would settle. You're not focused. You're not. And it's going to cause you anxiety. You're going to be more stressful at work. You're going to be more snappy. You're not going to be as focused. You're going to start making mistakes. And again, that all spirals into the fear factor. Do I give my job up, or am I just going to wait till I lose it? And that's a real thing.
I've seen it happen. I know you're not talking anecdotally there.
No, not
I
at
know
all.
people I've spoken with where it's husband and wife that have got maybe some issues with their child. That child's not able to get into the CAMS network, so they're not getting the support that they need through the CAMS network, and it gets to the point where they say one of us is going to have to give up work to look after our child, and that's a decision that you're always going to make. You're always going to do that.
A slightly bigger problem that, because the mental health provision in our country is such a mess, the waiting lists. I mean, I'm just outside Cambridge. You can wait 8 months for a referral, let alone will they actually help you. So during that 8 months, what do? Do you just give up work? How do you pay the bills? That's going to cause stress, isn't it?
Yeah. Everything's impacted, isn't it?
It all is. And yet again, if we could just allow employees to utilize the services that employers are offering to help the family unit, we could kill this. We really could. It's that simple.
Thank goodness the EAPs are starting to adopt this.
And they are, which is lovely. Yes. Yeah, I've had the pleasure, of talking to a few that can see this is an issue.
And it's going to make a huge difference. If you are an EAP provider that is providing this as an option for your customers' employees, it inevitably will make a huge positive impact. But for anyone who doesn't know it, we're talking about the problems here quite a lot. What is the Subconquest model? I keep calling it Subconquest because you're Subconquest as a business, but the model's called Ollie, isn't it? So how does the Ollie model work for both the child and the family and the employee?
I think there's, without going into the ins and outs of the whole therapeutic model, it's not any one therapeutic model. A lot are, which means you're shoehorned into it, and you're shoehorned into working with a therapist that you might not connect with. Point one. I think the biggest issues that I saw and the things that we do differently is we do work with the whole family. So, for example, if we're working in a school with a child or private practice, I can work with that child. I can maybe make some differences. I can give them some skills, some tools. But if I don't engage mum and dad or the carers, they won't know about it. So then it's not utilised at home. So that muscle isn't exercised, which means the child needs to stay in therapy even longer. So one of the things we're really big on is engagement. And it's not a case of, well, your child's anxious because of you, Carl. It's no finger pointing, because every parent's doing the best they can with the information they've got. So it's also the approach that we take of, I could work with your child for and hopefully help them deal with the anxiety. But they're going to get there a lot quicker if I show you how. And by showing you how, I might ease some of your anxiety as well, because now you're empowered again to help your child, which is going to take a lot of stress off. But I think one of the key things we do, and the only way I can describe it is to this is what I call a tree. Okay. These are all the behaviors. Now, most referrals that we get are based on a behavior of a child, teen, or adult. We don't just work with children. As I said, we work with them, and it's usually the behavior that's been highlighted. If you just deal with the behavior, if you have that connection, if the child's willing and ready to engage, i.e. there's no secondary gain, which by that I mean, no, I'm hanging on to this, you're not taking it away from me because it gives me something I need. I get mum and dad's attention, whatever it might be. And you manage to get rid of one of those behaviors. Well done. Pat yourself on the back. Aren't you clever? No. Because what will happen is it will grow back. Maybe not exactly the same behavior. There'll be a variation. It'll be slightly different, but it will grow back. And that's what's happening at the moment. We're getting rid of behaviors, patting ourselves on the back. A couple of months later, they're back. Not exactly the same, a variation. And the reason is this fundamental belief I drill into the guys that I train, because we train all of our own therapists, is that all behavior serves a purpose and it has a positive intent. Which will sound very strange if we're just talking about anxiety. How's that positive? It's not a nice feeling. Depression, that's not. What about self-harming? How's that positive? But at that point in time, it might be the only thing that makes a difference in a positive way, even if it's not great. But all of that is a behavior, but it's driven by an emotion. It's an emotion that curates the reaction. It's like a chain reaction. So if you keep doing this, you're just pruning the branches. You're never going to get rid of the problem because you haven't gone to the root, which is the emotion. And I remember when I first pointed this out to people at the time I thought much cleverer than me, I was told children don't really understand emotions. You're never going to be able to get that across to them. We have to do what we do. We have to fix, we have to heal. And most parents probably haven't got a clue either, which I thought was really quite a whole nother story. But again, because my mind works the way it does, I need things simple. If I tell you a sad story, you seem like a decent human being, it's going to affect you and you'll feel a little bit sad. If I tell you a joke, hopefully it'll make you laugh. So I've just created two emotions in you. Surely that gives me the superpower of creating emotion in you, which means you have that superpower of creating that emotion in others. But what we're not taught, we're taught my anxiety, or you'll have it forever. My depression, you'll have it forever. I'm not belittling people that have that. Believe me, it's horrible. But if that's what you're told, that's what you'll believe. What if I say to you, your anxiety, your depression are all trying to help you? And I know it doesn't feel that way, but if we could actually talk to them, if we could make them tangible, real, and talk to them. Is this what we do with children? I'm saying with children, we do it with adults as well. That point of separation, put my anxiety over there, my depression over there, and ask it, how are you helping me? Well, by keeping you depressed, I'm keeping you at home and you're not expecting anything, then you can't be let down. Bang! We're starting to go down to the root of the behaviour. So look, I could take all day explaining, but in a nutshell, I think that's what we do differently. And that's why it's so powerful and why people aren't with us forever, because the moment that we can see that domino going, we step out. We're not there forever. I want to make us all redundant. It'll never happen, but you get my point. Yeah.
The thing is, I could sit and listen to you talk about this all day because I've lived in the world of employee wellbeing and mental health and therapeutic support for decades now, and so often we hear the fact that it's getting to the root cause, but how often do we actually do that? Often we try to support things, identify the issue and deal with that issue maybe in a solution focused manner, which is good. But for children, the reality is it's enabling them to understand what is causing that anxiety and worry and allowing them to have the superpowers to fix it. And as you're saying, giving the parents and guardians the tools to be able to continue that, so they don't need to start this cycle of being in therapy forever.
I think one of the other problems is as well, I have never had a child, and very few teenagers self-refer. They just don't. You don't get a 7-year-old who wakes up in the morning, mother, I'm feeling a tad depressed. I'm going to book myself in with a therapist. It doesn't happen. So it's the caregivers and the parents that put the referral in. And they're putting the referral in based on their, what I call model of the world. So they're looking at something and going, oh, I've seen that before. That's definitely anger. I've seen that. That's definitely. So they're self-diagnosing their child. And what tends to happen is some therapists will absolutely take that as the issue and work on that. And the number of times, in fact, I'd say every time where a parent has said they're angry because that's what they're demonstrating and that's what the parent sees. But when you actually work with the child and you give them the tools to actually talk to whatever this feeling is, it's not angry, it's sad. And sometimes it's not sad, it's eh. And I don't say, oh, you mean scared. I use their words because I don't need to understand. I just need them to understand that it's a part of them that's not particularly content at the moment.
Yeah.
And how they can help it because they're older than it. They're wiser. They've got skills and capabilities they didn't know they had. And they can problem solve. And they certainly can with mum and dad.
So what do you think with, because EAPs have been providing counselling for decades now, and they do an amazing job of supporting employers and employees and the issues that they experience that cause people to be off work. And this is another reason that employees are finding themselves being off work. But I suppose what I'm saying is, why don't they just use what's already there? Why are they using this as opposed to everything else that's always been there and has always been doing a great job?
Okay. Again,
Deep
I
breath.
can only talk from my perspective. Before we got involved in the EAP world, I had so many of my clients and my coaches' clients that have an EAP provision. They either weren't using it because they were really worried about confidentiality. They weren't convinced that speaking to a counsellor was actually going to help them in any way because it was probably about the children and not about them. And realistically, what can you do in 4 to 6 sessions, or what the average EAP thing is? These guys are good. They're trained. Okay, they're not knocking it, and they do an awful lot of good. But can they empower in that time? And then I'm going to flip that by saying, not only do we empower in 4 to 6 sessions, we do a lot more. So it's doable. But I think it needs. We just need to shake it up. We need to stop fixing. We need to stop referring. We need to stop. There. A lovely man told me a story about someone that had severe debt problems, and he contacted his EAP provider and spoke to a lovely counsellor. And for an hour a week for the next 6 weeks, he felt better about his debt. But didn't make the debt go away. What happened week 7? That's the problem. And then what do EAPs do? Do they refer on to other organisations with huge waiting lists? And then again, it doesn't have to happen. The big stuff, bipolar, schizophrenia, yes, absolutely. That's a channel in itself. That's a separate conversation. But the bulk of the things that we're seeing as a mental health pandemic at the moment could be dealt with by empowering and teaching and working with the whole family a lot quicker than is happening. And it is, I just get so frustrated because I have meetings and I sit in meetings and I listen to all the problems. And I'm thinking, if we keep focusing on the problem, we all know what the problem is. What's the solution? We all agree it needs to be family. Why aren't we doing something about it? Oh, well, there's the tax thing. How can we get round that? Because only an idiot keeps doing the same thing, hitting their head against a brick wall. And I guess I said at the beginning, the Ollie model came about by diversity. I don't think like other people because I can't read and write. And I always thought that made me less. I actually think it makes me more because I can see that wall and I can see everyone banging their head. I just walk round the side, you know, there's always a way, but it's so stuck.
We are a product of our own superpowers, aren't we, to some degree, whether we
We're
consider
afraid of
those.
Change.
Exactly. So you must have seen some really sort of positive outcomes coming from this around things that have made a real difference. Anything you can think of that where you've said, do you know, I saw this happen, they spoke with me, this was the change?
Oh, there are so many stories I can regale you with. I think probably one of the ones that will hopefully hit home that this isn't rocket science. It was during COVID, and of course, COVID's the reason that we've all got anxiety. It's added to it. But no one event causes anxiety. It's how we deal with it that causes anxiety. And if you are taught resilience skills to go, okay, that happened, I have a choice now on how I feel rather than accept it, and you can move on. But I remember one story, I could tell you hundreds. And this lovely lady, she contacted me and she said, Ali, my daughter's brilliant. She loves school, does ballet, she's whatever, won't go to school at the moment, and I don't know what to do. And I said, okay, well, you're a parent, so what do you think's going on? And she said, oh, it's COVID, it's definitely COVID. And we'd kind of come out of COVID then, it was go back to school. And I said, okay, you say it's COVID. This is what I mean about projecting. Yeah. And I said, so what have you tried? Because you don't want to repeat, do you? That's silly, because we do a lot of that. And they said, oh, well, me and my husband have sat down and we've taken her for all the statistics. This kid was 7, right? All the statistics about, lung capacity and age and physical ability and what have you. And, the different strains of the inoculations provided and she went on for about half an hour. I was falling asleep and I certainly didn't understand half of what she said. And she said, nothing's worked. And she said, can you try? And I said, well, look, I can't say I can help, but I can't say I can't. Can I meet her? So I met this little girl, gorgeous little girl. I said, you don't want to go to school? She said, no. But you love school? Yeah, ballet, miss all of her friends. Yeah, she really wanted to be at school. It wasn't a secondary gain of... So I said, Mummy said it's about COVID. And she went, yes, it is. I'm like, well, okay, that's a first, because it's not normally what you think it is. So rather than dive into, well, there's different strains and you're young and fit and, the government statistics, rather than diving into that, I just said, what is it about COVID that makes you not want to go to school? And she said, it's the masks. I said, oh, okay, what is it about the masks? And she said, Mummy's given me a blue one, I want a pink one. And I kept a straight face, but yes, I did that. I said, so if you had a pink one, would that be okay? And she went, oh, yes. And I told Mum, and Mum was like, no, this is going to take months of sorting out. She's really worried about the COVID strain. And I said, just get her a pink mask, please. We've overcomplicated it. And I think that probably sums up an awful lot of the stories I would tell you where we've completely overcomplicated it. Either parents looking at it from a perspective of absolute protection, or professionals just we're not that complicated. We really aren't. We've got a pink mark, back to school.
We do as parents, don't we? We do project our beliefs and thoughts often. But when we're doing that from a place of love and help and support positive. And
yes.
And I think sometimes to just get that external perspective from somebody that actually understands that what might be going on is something different is really useful. Let me ask you this, Ali. If you were talking today with what we've said, but if a business leader walked through your door and said, this is just a bit of a nice to have though, isn't it? It's just kind of, we'll give people access to this and it's another tick box, it's another wellbeing service. What would you say to them?
I would say, there's my door. See you later. Because no, we're not. What you've got at the moment, no offence, because it's coming from a good place, I'll throw that one in there, but what you've got at the moment is a tick box. It is an absolute tick box. I was asked the other day how we could get employers to engage more in this, because you guys give them all these things in your EAP, which is lovely, right? But has anyone actually asked the employee what they need? And
not as much as they should is my response.
Another webinar I was on, and there's a couple of other companies on there that we've got this big new shiny online, and we've got this big new shiny online. I just sat there. And the guy said to me, Ali, what do you think about these 2 big shiny online things? And I said, they're brilliant. But I said, has anyone asked if anybody wants them? And if they're fit for purpose and if they will solve anyone's problem? And I think that's where we've gone wrong. And I think if anybody actually did give certain organisations, or even you guys as EAPs, permission to speak to their employers, and just say, seriously, put this survey out. We'll even write it for you. Nice, simple one. If you can only have 10 of the services that this EAP is providing, because these 10 are going to be really good, whereas these 20 are a little bit flaky or vague, you might not ever use. And these are your choices. What would you take? I am telling you, they would all jump on one that allowed them to look after their kids and family. And then the EAP is providing something that actually is needed. So they really aren't just ticking a box, they're doing the right thing. And the employers would be happy because everyone's in work and happy, and there wouldn't be so many fights or marital disputes. And best of all, the finance people, because it's a horrible thing to say, but it comes down to money. Finance people will be happy because done correctly and in a timely manner, you can stop it escalating, which will save you costs. Done properly in a timely manner, you've got everyone back at work at full function, and they're loyal as hell because you've helped their kids. Put a price on that.
And if employers don't do this, if they say to parents, if they expect their parents to be able to cope on their own, what does that look like?
Well, I think parents are very aware of that. So I've never been lucky enough to work in an organisation that did. I did once. I had healthcare once, I think, and I was worried about that because of the confidentiality thing, which is a big thing that needs to be gone over. But I think that if I was shown a handbook of all the things that my employer is offering me for an EAP, and from everything, I don't know, from gym membership to whatever, all these hundreds of things, I'd say, wow, thank you. That's brilliant. I'm going to come and work for this company. Maybe
I
I'll
think
use it. But if it had something on there that would help me and my family, the reason I'm even working, absolutely, I'd sign up and I'd give you my blood.
I think there's a lot to be said for that. And now we've got the evidence, of course. You know, we see from the EAPA report that actually the number 3 reason you argue might be the first. But, you know, certainly we see the evidence now, which we've never seen before, about the impact that children's mental health have on their families, on their parents who are working. That's the piece, the differential I'm trying to make here. And if there is an option to do that, if an EAP has the facility to be able to support those people, it will make a massive, massive difference.
And you know what? How easy it is to prove, Carl. We just need one EAP, and there's a couple out there that I think are thinking this way and smart enough to do it, to actually go to their employers and say, trial it. Yeah. Trial it. Get feedback.
I think they will. I think we're going to see more of that as well, Ali. I think we're going to see more people that say to their employers, or maybe their employers will ask the question, what is it you want from your wellbeing service? What is it you want from your EAP? And maybe one of them will have heard you or heard me or heard this and thought, yeah, do you know, there's something out there.
It's going to upset you though, Carl, because I think if anyone did actually ask that question because it wasn't a tick box and they actually genuinely cared, and forgive me for that, but I'm about saying it as it is, as nothing changes. I think you'd have to rewrite your latest white paper, because coming out top would be my family, my kids.
Well, those are the problems. Let's offer them the solution through this. And I suppose that leads me to my final question, and that is kind of what the vision is for you. Where do you see Subconquest, the Ollie model? What's the future look like? Where do you want it to be?
I want it to be an option for every family. And I say an option because it has to be a choice, because if it's not, we're going backwards again. You can only use this. But I would like them to have the choice of something that empowers, doesn't take months and months and months, allows them to parent again, that is cost effective and so simple, but gives them their lives back. And I don't see why any employer wouldn't want to offer that. But that's me.
I agree. Yeah. Ali, thank you so much for this. It's always fascinating talking with you, and to sort of pin you down to be able to have this conversation on a one-to-one is brilliant, because I talk with Ali quite regularly, and actually we talk about lots of different things, but being able to just narrow it down to this sort of brief conversation has been brilliant. I think it's a real eye-opener for me. It was when we met. I think it'll be a real eye-opener for many employers and leaders that get the opportunity to watch this. I think it's clear that when we think about workplace well-being, we can't just look at the individual anymore in isolation. We need to look at their family. We need to look at their home. We need to look at their children's emotional health, because every single one of those things play a vital role.
I just think we need to hold the mirror up, to be honest.
Yeah.
Is this a tick box, something else that you can add to? Look, I'm providing this, or do you mean it?
Yeah.
And that might be confrontational, but it's the truth.
Well, it looks like Subconquest showing us the way, showing us what's possible, I suppose, around helping the whole family. And as you said, you know, the results speak for themselves. There's some, I should say, there's some really clear, good clinical outcomes that we're seeing from this as well, from the NHS that you've shown me. So that's really positive to see. I suppose if people want to include this as part of their EAP, or if they want to include it separately as part of their wellbeing proposition, they can. How do they contact you?
They can either contact us through our website. Now, you did this on purpose because I'm dyslexic. I can do the first three letters. You can't get them wrong, can you? www.ollieandhisuperpowers or www.subconquest.co.uk. And I'd love to hear from you. I'll make myself free for anybody that gets what I'm saying here and isn't tick boxing.
That's excellent. Ali, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Carl.
If you've watched this, and until the next time that anyone's got a question that you and I can come on here and talk about, we'll say goodbye. So thanks, Ali.
Thanks, Carl. You take care.
You too.